It's Jets class, and we're going behind enemy lines with ESPN's Jordan Raanan, one of the best to do it, covering the Giants. Jordan, thanks so much for joining. I know there's a ton to get to here with the Battle of New York, Battle of New Jersey, whatever you want to call it. We're going to start with this, though. We are recording earlier in the week, so depending on when you're watching this, we might know the answer to this question. But what is your feel right now as it pertains to the Giants injury report and who we might be seeing here against the Jets?
The two I think probably have the best chance of making it for Sunday are probably Daniel Jones and Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas seems to have made progress in the past couple of weeks. He was working with trainers, not on the field, but at least working with trainers last week. And that's huge for this Giants offense, obviously. Andrew Thomas is the key piece to their offensive line. He's the one offensive lineman that you know is an above average quality, really solid player. And they need that because then it takes the pressure off the other side. And then obviously Daniel Jones, we'll wait and see. That's a tough one with regard to getting clearance. But I do think he has a shot. John Michael Schmitz, a little more of a long shot. Obviously, the Giants rookie center could be out another week here. And then that moves pieces around. Ben Bredesen's at center. But maybe Justin Pugh then gets to move to guard because if Andrew Thomas makes it back.
Evan Neal, optimistic about him? Over on the right side?
Yeah, I would think so. He was out on the field at least a little bit last week. Now, obviously, Neal was struggling. I mean, even when he walked out to practice, one of those days, it was like, man, he could barely walk out to practice. But he was questionable this week, so that I do think Evan Neal has a shot. But here's the question, Connor. Are they really even better with Evan Neal over Tyree Phillips? I mean, it's at least comparable at this point.
Now, this is kind of a fascinating one to me because last year you had the Giants, new GM, new coach. They not only make the playoffs, but then they beat the Minnesota Vikings. Generally, when you have a team that does that or accomplishes that, it sets pretty high expectations. The media hypes all around them, especially in this city. However, this summer, all of the talk was the Jets, the team that hasn't made the playoffs since over a decade, the team that went in and got the new quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. They were on Hard Knocks. They were the story of the NFL. You actually asked this to Brian Dable and Joe Schoen, and they answered it as best as they could, but I thought it was a great one. But reading between the lines, knowing what you know, do you think that some of the hype and the attention that was directed at the Jets stealing some shine away from the Giants, you think that ticked them off over there a little bit? That might add some to this rivalry here with big brother, little brother?
I don't know if it ticked them off because I think, and Xavier McKinney actually said this to me when we're at the time before the season when I asked him, the Jets are the hot story right now. Aaron Rodgers was still healthy at that time. And he said, no, we're still the big brothers, right? We're still the big brothers in the relationship. And I think that a lot of people over there in that building still look at it that way, right? The Giants are the more accomplished team historically. They have 4 Super Bowls. In the last, dating back to the 80s, the Jets is 1969 season.
Been a while.
So, yeah, they're the team that probably has the bigger fan base. I don't know if there's ever been a study that's been done, but these are the things that I think live over there in that building. And that's the way that a lot of people think is what Xavier McKinney said is that, hey, we're the Giants, we're the big bad team over here. Almost regardless of what the results are on the field, just the feeling of what the organization is. So I think that's where the Giants stand in regards to the Giants-Jets rivalry and the Jets maybe taking away their shine. Where if the Giants made the playoffs, which they did last year, everything would take care of itself. And if they won games, the Giants would be the big story again.
Do you think that this is something, too, where the Giants are going through their struggles? We're going to get to that in a second here, but is this something where you almost feel like a loss to the Jets because they are the Jets, the team that the Giants kind of look down their nose at a little bit? It would just sting to the point where a bad start, probably playoff list start, or the way the season's going to go is to be out of the playoffs because of the start, that a loss to the Jets would almost be like just rubbing it into the wound and kind of making it even worse.
I don't think for the players it matters so much. Like they don't
ownership.
Really feel it. But when you're talking about management and ownership, I mean, I haven't heard about it in recent years, but remember when the two teams were building a stadium and sharing a stadium, there was bad blood around that Rex Ryan era between the organizations for sure. I doubt it has fully dissipated and gone away. I still think it exists to some degree at the highest levels of management, namely ownership. So I think it would definitely, first of all, the Giants season would all but over if you're sitting at 2-6 through 8 games. You're not putting together a run at that point. Their only chance to put together a run is they just won a game against Washington, win this week, win again next week against Oakland. This is an opportunity for them to put together a winning streak and get their season back where they have chance at making a run. So for that to end, for that to basically have to come to the realization, by the way, 2 days before the trade deadline, that your season is not going anywhere, and then it be the Jets on top of that, I do not think that will sit well with people named Mara.
Yep. Completely agree with you. Now, you obviously cover the Giants. You're there every single day. I'm there partially, but I think both of us shared the same feeling that this team looked better in camp than they were a year ago. Daniel looked better. They had better playmakers. The defense was going to take a step forward because it was the second year in Wink's scheme. What's gone wrong? I know that's like big picture, like really broad stroke, but I mean, you don't get to 2-5 with just a bad bounce year or two, especially with the way the Giants have lost some of these games. So how have they gone from a team that won a playoff game last year, had expectations to go back to the postseason this year, to now one that's, I mean, you're threatening to have your season basically be over before we even get to Halloween.
Well, Connor, we had this conversation, right? I told you that I thought the Giants offense, the Jets offensive line was the topic of discussion. And I told you at the time, I said, you know what? I think the Giants have a worse line. And on top of that, we talked about two things. The line could derail them and the depth of the roster. Yes. And so they had all these injuries on top of the line being a disaster. And then Daniel Jones didn't play particularly well because he was under consistent pressure. That was a huge part of it. And he wasn't able to play at the level he did last year. And I think that's why you saw the Giants get off to such a rough start. Also, think about it. The level of competition is raised so much higher. The Giants have lost to the Cowboys, the 49ers, the Dolphins.
The Bills.
I mean, these are the who?
Bills as
the
well.
Bills and the Seahawks. Those are all really good teams. Like, everybody thinks those are really good teams. They're all teams that are at the end of the season probably going to have a winning record and be in it and have a serious chance to make a run. So that they didn't have that last year. We knew that was part of the equation too. And a lot of people said it, and I said it, I picked them to go 8-9, is they could be a better team, but with worse results. Now, they haven't been a better team, but I think as they get healthier, we're going to see pretty much what we thought the Giants are, which was a good team, but not one that could compete with the teams at the upper echelon teams.
Here's one that I don't know. I know you joke about being the conductor. I'm still a believer in Daniel Jones. Like, I don't think he is a top 5 quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to be one of the best in the entire world, but he is somebody that I think you can win with. I do. You give him a good line, you give him good playmakers. I think he can be a player that takes you to the playoffs, potentially takes you to the Super Bowl as long as he has that surrounding talent. Where is your worry meter, though, with him this year? And I know we haven't seen him in a couple of the weeks since that Dolphin game, and I know the line has contributed to some of his struggles, but where are you on that worry with him? Is your opinion on him changing? Do you still think that this team can win with him? Do you think at the end of the year we're talking about them drafting a quarterback and replacing? Where are you with Daniel?
Well, even though I am the conductor, which you can see here, I even have the hat to prove it. I was always of the belief that Daniel Jones was a guy you can win with, but not necessarily win because of, right? Yeah. And so if everything else is right around him, you can win games. I don't ultimately think he's just going to be the Super Bowl winning quarterback. Not sure I was ever at that level, but I think if things settle, if the offensive line settles, they get more time together. I thought that Darren Waller connection between him and Darren Waller was very close. If you go back to that San Francisco game, there was some big games that I thought as we went forward in the season, they would have started hitting some of those big plays that were really close to happening. Now, Tyrod Taylor has played really well, right? He has. There's no way around it. He has outplayed Daniel Jones to this point this season, but we also have a bigger sample size with Daniel Jones. We saw it last year. We saw it over, 19 games because they made the playoffs, and they won a playoff game. So I think if we got an opportunity to get going here further into the season, things will settle a little bit, and we'll see the Daniel Jones that we saw most of the time last season. So I'm not off the bandwagon. Now, if you're talking about, do I want to build a team from scratch? Yeah. Would I start with Daniel Jones? No, that's not the way I would go, because he's not the guy who's going to win you Super Bowls and lead you there and be the main purpose of you winning, right? He's not Patrick Mahomes. We all know that. He's not Josh Allen. He's not any of those guys. But can you win with him with the right pieces around him? I think you can. And the Giants, they would have won some games if Daniel Jones stayed healthy and the offensive line held up to a better degree than it did.
Two more quick ones for you, Jordan. The first one is that I think we're both probably in agreement with this, that the Jets have a better team. The Giants, there's a couple positions the Giants are better at where you want to talk about left tackle with Thomas when he's healthy. Quarterback, I would give the edge to Daniel Jones over Zach Wilson. Dexter Lawrence, maybe, or Leonard Williams, I'm sorry, is a better second defensive tackle than what the Jets have. But when you look at the totality of the roster, even the entire offensive line or the entire defensive line, the Jets are the better team. Where I see the advantage for the Giants, though, and it is a big one, is Wink Martindale, whose defense has been playing absolutely lights out the last 2 weeks, going up against an inexperienced quarterback still in Zach Wilson, who has not seen Wink Martindale in a regular season game before. What, in your opinion, makes Wink's defense so good, and what makes it so hard for young quarterbacks to have success against? You saw he just absolutely tormented Sam Howell. I mean, he gave Josh Allen fits, all that stuff.
Well, the idea that he would torment a guy like Sam Howell makes perfect sense, because what Wink Martindale does is he creates the impression of pressure coming from a lot of different ways. Like, he might only rush 4 at times, but it's not necessarily the normal 4 you think are going to come. And so that's kind of what you saw. Now, he was on the more aggressive side against Sam Howell, and he brought the blitz, and he was blitzing like crazy, right? Because that makes sense. That's the younger quarterback, like Zach Wilson.
Right? I saw your stat, the percentage. It was almost like 50 or 55% he brought.
Yeah. And the week before, it was close. It was like, I think we lead below 30. So against Josh Allen, a more experienced quarterback, you have to be pick your spots more. Whereas a guy against Sam Howell and probably against Zach Wilson, he's going to be, all right, we're going to get this guy. Every time he goes back, we need to make him feel like he's under pressure. And then that could force him to make mistakes, make bad throws. You saw Sam Howell's accuracy yesterday was all over the place. That's because of what Wink Martindale does. And I expect to see him do similar things to Zach Wilson, which is why it's going to be imperative for the Jets to get Breece Hall and to get going and run the ball.
All right, last one for you is the last I saw was the Jets were favored by 3. Overall pick for the game, just so you think Jets-Giants win. And if you do think the Jets are going to win because good teams win, great teams cover, will the Jets cover that spread? If you're picking,
I'll go with the Jets win, but not cover. Like something really low scoring.
Hammer the under.
A 14-13 kind of game. I can't see the Giants putting up a lot of points against this Jets defense. I just can't. There's I'm trying to think of the range of outcomes. I'm trying to figure the range of outcome where the Giants score 24, 27, 28 points, and I can't get there. So I'm going to say really low scoring, and the Jets, on the strength of their defense, find a way to put up more points than 13 or 14, which is even when Tyrod Taylor's playing well, right, which everyone thinks he did. Mm-hmm. I mean, they scored 23 points in 2 games.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think the only thing that scares me about this game, if I'm looking at this from the green glasses of the Jets, is just Wink versus Zach. That legitimately scares me, because it's just that's where the Jets can lose it, because it's Bill Belichick who's given Zach.
Don't mess it up.
Wink can do it too. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Just hand it off to Breece.
Don't mess it up.
Yeah, Breece will have about 35 touches this game as the Jets play that one not to lose. All right, Jordan, thank you so much for joining, man. Plug anything you want to play. Breaking Big Blue. I know the podcast you have is absolutely
Breaking Big Blue podcast, and at Jordan Raanan on social, at Jordan Raanan ESPN on Instagram, Facebook, wherever else you go social.
All right, we'll have you back on later before the Super Bowl when the Jets and Giants meet again.
2029.
Yeah, there we go.